worst show I ever had. Already laughing. Worst show I ever had, without a shadow of a doubt, was the show in. I hate to say it, just in case anyone I know is ever listening, but it's in Charleston, South Carolina. I was home during the holiday, I was home in the fall. I was about to do a really big show in my hometown, and I hadn't been on stage in a while. I'd been traveling a lot, and I think maybe a month or so since I'd been on stage. And for people who don't know, I think for comedians, spending any amount of time off stage, it just creates all the more anxiety about the next time that you have to go on stage. And so that's why this quarantine thing is like, oh my God, I'm living in so much fear right now. I'm never going to be on stage again, which isn't totally true, but it's a thing. It's like, you get rusty, you get like, oh yeah, it's same thing with surfing. It's like the amount of time you spend out of the water, you forget that you're good at it. You forget your confidence, you forget, and you're like, oh, can I do this? And maybe in the beginning there's this awkward kind of like readjustment, but then your muscle memory kicks back in, you figure out and you go. And so that's why they say, try to be consistent with stage time. I remember that's something that you would always tell me to do. And so at this particular point, it had been a month, I think, since I'd been on stage, and I had a really big show coming up. And so I was kind of nervous with my big show being the show that I got back on stage with. And so someone had said, they had a show in Charleston that I could come and I could do some time there. And so it'd be this little theater, and I had like a 12-minute spot, I think. And I was like, that sounds great. Perfect. And then the day of, we were already driving down there. My husband was with me, and I got a message, and the guy was like, oh, like, heads up. Apparently the theater was rented out today for the FSU, some football game in the South, which is, if you're in the South, that's a big deal. Right. Football is a big deal. And so they said, the theater couldn't actually use the theater for the show. It had been blocked out, and they kind of forgot about it. So the show's going to be at the barbecue pit next door. And just the word barbecue pit, I was like, oh God. Because any show that is in a bar or a brewery or a winery, or it could be the nicest restaurant in the world. It's not personal, but it's just a comedy show is not meant to function in a restaurant where people may or may not have showed up for comedy, but everyone's talking or there's stuff going on. Like, a comedy show is meant to happen with one person on stage and everyone else facing them, and the room is at attention, so to speak. And so it's not that they're not horrible, but the comedian, I feel like, has to do more work, expend more energy to try to get people to focus, as opposed to them already being focused in on them, in the theater. And so as soon as I saw barbecue pit, I was like, oh, here we go. And on top of that, we got to the barbecue pit, and they said, well, it's not as big of a turnout as it usually is, probably because of the football game, but we'll still have a good crowd. Oh, and the game's on now, but we're going to turn off the game right before the show starts.
It's the worst thing to do.
It's the worst thing to do to a comedian when people were at the barbecue pit in the South to watch the football game, not to come to comedy night. Some came for comedy night, but certainly not the whole place. And then you're going to turn off the football game, the thing that they came there to watch. That's the first way to start off your night, with a boo. Like, it's not good. And so sure enough, they turn off the TV, and some people left and some people were bothered. But then, whatever. The host got on stage, and he said he was going to do a certain amount, and I don't think he did as much time as he said he was going to do, because he did not get a single laugh. I mean, he just struggled. And he's a funny guy. I've seen him before. But he didn't get a single laugh. And then he goes, well, how about, who's ready for me to bring some real comedians up here? And one person went. Got one pathetic little clap. And then I was the next one to go. I was like, oh my God, I can't. And sure enough, I mean, it was like pulling teeth. And I was doing material that I've done before plenty of times, that works plenty of places. But it's like we said before, like, there's no guarantees. And that everything everything was set up to make it sort of be a disaster. Like it just was. Like I worked at Starbucks before, and they used to say, set everybody up for success. Set the next shift that's coming in, set them up for success. Have the station cleaned, have da 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 da. Even if it's not your job, you're setting it up for the next person. And it's that same thing. The same thing with comedy. It's like the best shows are the ones in which the comedians are set up to do well. You know, whether it's the environment, the people, the host, the energy, to the layout of the room, like the things that you don't even think matters. It's so easy to blame a comedian for like not being good when they haven't been set up. And, you know, a lot of people say, oh, you can't blame the audience if you're not funny. And sometimes I agree with that, but sometimes I really don't. Like sometimes I just think there are no-win situations. And I think the comedian did do as best as they could, and they had an off night, you know? And and that's the same thing. People say, oh, customer service, customer's always right. Honestly, they're not.
Nope.
Like customers are jerks.
People who say that have never worked in customer service.
Exactly. Yeah. So yeah, I think the same is true. And I remember I got off stage. Oh, and towards the end, I do, you know, I like to include a little bit of depth in my comedy. And I wondered how much I should include because I was at the barbecue pit and I was like, I don't know how much people want to hear my depth. But I did say a little bit, you know, like about dating, and I have this joke about dating a guy. And so I say a little bit about, you know, certain types of guys before, or knowing your worth. And I made some, you know, right before I get to the funny part, I say something about the importance of knowing your worth. And so I said something like, you know, I used to make really poor choices, especially about men. And before I could even keep getting to the joke part, this like drunk guy in the back just goes, yo! And I was like, yeah, choices like that guy. Like, and then he kept trying to like, it's like that person in the audience that's trying to get the attention back, you know? And I'm always constantly trying to figure out how much do I engage because I want to show that I can control it, or how much do I let it go because I don't actually want to give them all of the attention that they're trying to get. I mean, even that's kind of like, So I remember I got off that show, and my husband, it was like an 1.5-hour drive, and my husband drove us back home, and I got in the car and I just cried. And I was like, I don't know if I could do this. I don't know what happened. I don't know.